And good afternoon, everyone. First and foremost, I would like to welcome you to our second webinar. This time, we're going to speak to Tony about achieving cost savings and efficiency in your academic operations. We're doing this live, by the way, at the Alan B. Levan Innovation Center at NSU in Broward County in Florida. So this is very exciting because usually, you're on the other side of the screen. And so it's going to be interesting doing this for the first time live. And the idea today is to cover several topics that can help your institution's academic operations, leading to remarkable improvements in optimization, efficiency in the student enrollment process, all centered on how to be cost effective in this process. And then we're going to talk about predictive analytics and retention of students using AI and machine learning technologies. So we're going to take approximately 30 to 40 minutes, we hope. And the two main topics will be the first one on how colleges and universities can achieve effective cost management through strategic enrollment planning through data-driven technologies such as uPlanner. And the second topic will be how can colleges and universities utilize their own data along with predictive analytics to boost student retention through AI technologies or technologies that use machine learning. And then at the end, we'll have questions and answers. In between each topic, we will have also poll questions. So we encourage the audience to also answer the poll questions. And then we'll start. How about that, Tony? Should we start?
I think we should get going, Mario.
Okay, awesome. So I would like to introduce ourselves. First of all, as I said, I would like to introduce Tony Casciotta. Tony is a former Vice President of Information Technology and Chief Information Officer at Broward College. He brings 40 years of technology experience while providing transformative leadership for all aspects of technology environment, including project management, cloud-based applications, networking, databases, web management, classroom technology, managed services, and vendor relationships. Also, other areas where Tony is an expert is in cybersecurity and data analytics. He's a firm believer in aligning IT solutions with the goals of your institution, operational excellence, building strategic technology plans, agility, process improvement, and being the trusted advisor to all internal and external business partners that dominate today his agenda. He's earned a degree in computer technology from CDI. He has held various management roles with AT&T, Cisco Systems, Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, National West Bank, and most recently, CIO and CISO at Altran.
Wow.
Yeah.
I didn't know I did all that.
Yeah,
Mario.
yeah, that's
Thank you for that wonderful introduction.
Yeah, thank you. And myself, Mario Sanchez, I'm the Chief Commercial Officer at uPlanner, and I manage all sales and marketing for this company that we're also going to be touching today. So before I begin, Tony, I want to be able to talk about uPlanner briefly in the next 5 minutes. To those audience members that don't know about us, I want to kind of brief you on what we do. We're an institutional planning system for academic operations, and we consider ourselves the single source or third system that universities can use to operate and also bridge the gap between your LMS, your SIS, your CRM, and other technologies to cover such areas that are critical in the academic operations, such as planning, scheduling, enrollment, curriculum management, retention, faculty allocation, and also, being one source of data where all the data that comes from your several platforms can also be analyzed and trying to figure out what gaps can we cover and also resolve some of those objectives around your academic operations. Our vision is to become the leading ed tech company worldwide, providing higher education institutions with data-driven solutions to plan smarter, perform better, and impact more lives. We have over 8 years of experience building these technologies. We're 100% focused in higher education. We work with over 110 universities and colleges around the world in 16 countries. And also we're a firm Microsoft partner. We have been awarded by Microsoft the last several years In 2017, we awarded EdTech Partner of the Year. And in 2021, we won an award for partner with the greatest social impact for a project we did with the government of Peru. We have a broad technology ecosystem that comprises over 10 modules, from academic planning that involves all the curriculum management of an institution, to demand planning, which involves being able to forecast courses, sections, being able to optimize class schedules and become more efficient in your planning of physical infrastructure to allocate students to the right classes. And finally, we have a tool or solution called Student Success Initiative Planning, which is all about identifying at-risk students, being able to predict and also be able to recommend actions that the students may have to take in order for them not to fail the class. And as I said at the beginning, we do this around data. So we built these workflows, these purpose-built workflows designed for your specific institution, all around data. We've always used data science as the base to analyzing that data and deliver and develop those solutions that I just presented. So that's a brief presentation of our technology in our company. And how about, Tony, if we begin our conversation?
Sure, that sounds great, Mario. And that's a really good background for, I think, for the audience.
Thank you. So I'm going to have around 8 questions, Tony, and, answer as you can. And then, obviously I'll try to chip into the conversation as I can as well. Okay. So let's start with our first question, Tony. So what is the impact that a good or poor enrollment strategy could have in a college or university?
Well, Mario, I think now that we're in the post-COVID era, many colleges have realized that they have to take a really good hard look at their cost structures. Enrollment and retention is really has taken a downturn since COVID. A lot of students haven't returned to face-to-face classes. Organizations are struggling with the modalities of how to teach, either in the hybrid world or specifically just in the online world. And so they haven't historically looked at the cost of their programs. And so now the times are changing. And so I think most colleges and universities are really starting to take a deep dive into, are these programs profitable? What are my academic operations costs? What's the overhead in terms of supporting students from an academic perspective, not just how much we pay faculty, but there's advisors, there's deans, and there's administration that go into that. So now they're starting to take a look at all those different components, because it makes a lot of sense to get as much cost efficiency as you can when your enrollment is down.
Yeah, and I think also aside of the cost efficiency, it's also the ability to give students more flexibility in their learning. I assume that, now that, as you said, we're living in this post-COVID era, students are wanting more flexibility. There's more modalities of learning, right? There's hybrid learning now. There's, flexible learning. There's also in-person learning that is traditional learning, and also online learning. So, in a way, they have to meet this demand from students that they have to be more flexible, because there are students that want to take multimodalities, and being able to schedule the right sections for those specific students, or allocate the right classroom spaces for those students, also becomes a challenge. It can be costly for the university.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely. I mean, times have changed, right? So historically, students would come in, they would take their classes in person, and they would go off and do whatever they were doing prior to coming to school, right? But COVID has really changed a lot of that. So the modalities that students want now have dramatically changed. Most two-year schools, the students are working adults. So as an example, you would always think that most colleges would schedule your basic English and math classes at a certain time during the day. Well, that's not so applicable any longer. You have to be flexible. You have to be flexible with the modality, and you have to be flexible with the scheduling of classes, because it's now about the student. It's not about what the university has to offer. It's about what the student actually requires. And degrees aren't even as important as they used to be. Getting certifications and stacking those credentials so that students can go off and get good jobs and then come back to the school to finish their degrees. So it's really important that colleges become flexible in terms of scheduling, what time the classes are, how many sections they may need, and it's almost impossible to do that at point in time. And that's why you need systems like uPlanner that actually is starting to take that data and compute that data and make sure that you start to understand the patterns and what's happening with your student body. And do they want to take, as an example, do they want to take classes at night, or do they want to take classes in the morning? And you can't get that by point in time registration or be able to adjust appropriately that quickly.
Correct. And also be able to predict future demand as well is also important, because I think at the end of the day, if you give, as you said, that student the best experience possible, let's say in the first 2 weeks of semester start, where they're going to the right class, where they're having that flexibility, that student is going to want to continue coming back to the university, especially if, or college, especially if they're, continuing education students that, are lifelong learners.
Sure. It's the same thing as buying a car, right?
Okay.
If you go in and have a good experience buying a certain type of vehicle, more than likely you're going to come back and buy that same type of vehicle again.
Great. Thank you, Tony. On to the next question. Why is strategic planning essential today to achieve cost savings in the academic operations of a college or university?
Well, like I said, I think it's the time now is that colleges and universities have to start catering to their student body, not the other way around. We're not going to have English classes Monday, Wednesday, and Friday every day at 10 o'clock in the morning. They have to start to understand the student needs. It's very, very important that they are flexible enough that the student can fit continuing education within their schedule. Because again, most of these students are working class, they have families, and they're trying to provide a better way of life for their families and their loved ones. And so colleges have to really kind of take a step back and say, all right, if that student and these group of students need classes, then we need to adjust our schedules. But also to drive efficiency, how do we use the classrooms most efficiently, right? So if we're going to just put up 2 classes in an evening in one building, and there's multiple classes going on in the adjacent building, well, why are we going to put the air conditioning and the lights on in one building when we could actually move those 2 classrooms into another building and actually start to gain some efficiencies by not powering that building to its fullest?
Correct. Yeah. And also, as you said, being able to utilize underutilized spaces that could exist at a specific campus or location to accommodate probably more students that could be, enrolling for the following semester.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I think it's a proven fact. The more students that you put in a class, the more profitable that class is. Obviously, there's some parameters and there's some legalities around how many students you can actually put in an English class, as an example. I know the state of Florida, it's 25 students per class.
Okay.
So you're not going to use, if you have a tool that knows that a classroom can hold 40 people, why are you going to schedule an English class in there where another class could actually use a larger classroom? So you can use a tool, actually use the right classroom for the right section for the right time of day.
Perfect. Efficient as it can be, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, yes. And the other thing I think that gets ignored as well is exam scheduling. Because one thing is scheduling classes or sections, and another thing is scheduling exams. You don't want to have probably students taking very difficult exams one day after the other. So, in a way, giving that flexibility for them to have the right time for the right exam, or they're on the right date in order for them to prepare and study is also could be taken into consideration by the academic department of college, university.
That's absolutely correct. It's not just the tests, right, in the exams, it's also the combination of classes. So if you do your course planning and your ed planning correctly for your students, or you have a tool the students can do that, then they won't have a toxic mix of courses, right? So they don't want to, like you mentioned, they don't want to take 2 very difficult courses during the same semester. If history shows that they're going to fail out of one of those, or they're going to have to drop one of those because they can't get through it because the exams are too hard for both classes. So so a tool with predictive analytics can actually show the toxic mixture of different types of courses depending on the program that the student selects.
Very interesting. Next question: what challenges do institutions commonly face in aligning resources with demand, and how they can overcome them?
This is a very interesting question, because there's many schools out there, regardless of size, regardless of whether they're a 4-year or a 2-year school, that are actually doing scheduling on spreadsheets. And they have multiple people actually doing that, especially if you have a college with multiple campuses. So then you're now scheduling all different types of classes on different types of campuses that may have different types of classrooms. So you have an awful lot of labor that goes involved with scheduling those classes. It's all being done on spreadsheets. Then you have to have input from the faculty that they can actually teach those classes. You have to take modalities into consideration. So aligning those resources with the demand is very, very difficult if you're doing that just based on semester registration data, because that's just a point in time. There's really no room to plan. There's no time to plan ahead for how do you spread those classes out across campuses, what time of day, and the actual mix of classes as well.
Exactly. And you mentioned Excel spreadsheets. So I was reading a report the other day, and 50% of institutions still utilize spreadsheets. And I asked myself how much space those spreadsheets are going to have, with a constant changing or increase in scheduling conflicts that could happen before semester starts, during pre-enrollment or enrollment. And, there could be a lot of human error as well. So why not utilize, technologies like uPlanner in order to make it digital, easy to use workflows, very intuitive, very easy to use, get all that data that they may have in your student information system, your LMS, your CRM, inclusive in spreadsheets, and have the technology use its own algorithms to create those simulations, those scenarios for class scheduling.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. And that's not just for class scheduling, right? So most colleges and universities also rent out space, and they actually make money by renting out those spaces. So I know a lot of colleges also have simulation centers. They would actually rent out some of those simulation centers to hospitals. So the hospitals can come in and actually do some practicing and some teaching in a simulation center versus having to do it and taking up a real room that a patient could be in a hospital, for an example. So colleges also rent out spaces. They have gathering. They may have auditoriums where concerts and different types of entertainment could be used. But also, how do you schedule all that? How do you keep track of all that? Spreadsheets is pretty antiquated.
How do you schedule? How do you ensure that the person reserving that specific space is not going to come that day and it's already booked for something else, right?
That's exactly right. Yeah,
that's
sure.
Yeah,
and we've seen that happen in the past
a lot of times.
Yeah,
correct. The last question around this topic is, what role does technology play in supporting effective cost management and strategic planning?
Well, in a lot of colleges nowadays, a lot of universities, there's a lot of point systems. So you may have an HR system, you may have a finance system, you may have a student information system. You mentioned a CRM, a retention system, a recruitment system. So most colleges have all the data points that you could possibly think of. It's just that they're not correlated and putting in a central location and actually being joined and used in the most appropriate fashion. They have all the data. They are basically data rich, but information poor. So by having a system where you can start collecting these very important data points from various systems, putting them together, technology can play an awful key role in ensuring that the deans and the administration of the college are actually planning correctly and appropriately for their students' requirements.
Exactly. It's all about planning at the end of the day. So
absolutely,
that's great. So for the audience that is live with us in this webinar, we have our first poll question. It's going to be showing up very shortly, and the question is, which area are you most interested in optimizing in terms of cost management at your institution? So while the audience answers this question, Tony, now we're going to get into our other subject, which is, how to utilize data along with predictive analytics to boost student retention through AI technologies, machine learning technologies. We know that student retention still continues after so many years, because I've been hearing the same topic over many, many years, continues to be an issue. And I think, there are solutions out there that can really, really support this and help improve student outcomes and make sure that students are supported and faculty supported with technology. So the first question is, how can technology and data-driven solutions that use AI support an institution's retention initiatives and contribute to the overall student success?
Well, that's a pretty broad
Mhm.
question because there's a lot going on in any institution at any one given time. Um, but I think it's really important that the technology leader in the organization is partners with all parts of the academic side of the house. So whether that is student services or curriculum management, the technology leader has to really understand their pain points. They need to understand what is missing, what kind of data points would they like to see that they don't have. Like I mentioned before, most colleges, most universities have enough systems to collect all the data points that they could possibly need. I think it's the CIO who's got to stand up and create a culture of data-driven
Okay.
strategies around what is good for the student. So for an example, why do you wait for a student to drop a class because they're struggling? I mean, there's many indicators that a student is struggling before they even drop a class or before they even approach a professor. So if you had those data points in a warehouse or in a location, and you're using the proper technologies to mine that data and look at patterns, you can actually intervene with that student way before they're in trouble. And I think that's the most important thing, because most times institutions are actually intervening after the problem happened. And so these kind of tools and these kind of data-driven strategies allow you to get ahead of those problems.
Yeah, and also there's the prediction of students that are at risk, but also there's a prescription of actions that an instructor or a dean or somebody involved in student affairs, a tutor, can do in order for the students not to fail the class. And I also think that there is the technology like uPlanner that supports that kind of initiative, which is on one end being able to predict, but on the other end being able to prescribe, which is also a challenge because in many occasions, instructors may need that support with ideas as to how the student can continue evolving and performing better in the specific class.
Yeah, absolutely right. I mean, most professors are aware of all their students and how they're doing. But there are occasions where all the students in those classes are struggling, right? And why is that happening? And so if you have these data points and you start to understand that you have more than just one or two students struggling in a class, that gives the ability for a dean to maybe interact with that professor and say, hey, look, we're seeing a pattern here of students struggling. Is your syllabi exactly what they anticipated? Or did they enroll in a class that's actually different than what you are kind of teaching them in terms of principles? So I think it's very important that you have all that data so that you can impact the student body in general, not just each individual students. Because I mean, some colleges have 50,000 students, and so you have to pay attention to them all, not just one by one.
Correct. And we were talking earlier that, at the end of the day, the data is there. The data has been accumulated all these years, and it's be able to, as you said, mine that data and be able to see patterns through these kind of technologies, which is what we're trying to accomplish here at uPlanner.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and then you may even uncover things that are non-academic, right?
Okay.
So you could have students with food insecurities or transportation insecurities or housing insecurities, and you wouldn't know that unless you actually intervene with the student, right? So you wouldn't know to intervene with the student and start to ask those questions unless you had the data that said, hey, Johnny is actually really struggling with this subject. Why? It seems like he does fine in the afternoon at 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock when he takes his science class, but he's having a real difficult time in the morning. And maybe it's the fact that he hasn't had dinner or breakfast or something along those lines. So then a professor can actually start to see patterns and interject on behalf of the student. I know where I came from. We knew that students had struggled with food insecurities. We actually put pantries on some of our campuses, and we found that out through mining data.
That's fantastic. That's a great story. And this leads us into kind of the second question, which we kind of responded is, what common approaches used today, such as monitoring independent variables? So in uPlanner, we have over 100 variables that we can measure, but there's the traditional ones like attendance, grades, on-time tuition payments that we feel that is not enough to properly predict at-risk students. So do you share this this idea as well that, we need to have more variables in the prediction models that we can offer?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, I think that in some cases there are socioeconomic indicators that
Mhm.
you could pull into your databases and then pull that into uPlanner. As an example, high unemployment rates in certain areas may lead to certain student patterns. And then you could actually understand that students from these zip codes are struggling and why. And then you can intervene based on that. So it's not just all the data that you have on premise. It could be external databases as well that you use a tool like this to start mining that data.
Yeah, we had a client that was able to identify non-traditional students that were dropping out because of the distance, the time it took to them from their houses all the way to the campus. And that allowed the university to reanalyze, whether they had to build something that was closer to the next town or the next village. And it really worked out. So we were able to, through that specific variable, which was distance from their houses to the campus, they were able to make those adjustments, maybe offering better times in their scheduling as well for students.
Yeah, and also think about not just attaining a degree, right?
Mhm.
So some students are coming in to obtain certification so that they can progress in their careers. And so uh, degrees may be not as important to some students as is obtaining certifications, especially you look at the IT industry. Attaining a cybersecurity certification is actually going to bump up your salary pretty dramatically nowadays, right? So project management's another one of those areas that is in high demand. You also have analytics, which is in
Okay.
very high demand. So yes, some of these do require 2 and 4 year degrees, but other parts of the workforce just require those certifications and some stackable credentials, and they're off to getting really good jobs. And like I mentioned before, once they obtain good jobs, they can provide for their families, then they can think about returning to
Of course.
school and obtaining their degrees.
Exactly. And then down to our last question, are there any specific recommendations or considerations you can give for institutions that are just starting to explore the use of predictive analytics for student retention?
Well, um, I think the college president, the university president has to embrace using data to make informed decisions.
Mhm.
And that's a culture. I think it can't be in pockets around the organization. So I think the senior leadership team of the organizations have to basically agree that that's what they're going to do. They're going to use the data that's in their systems, use that data, join that data, understand that data, and then make informed decisions based on that data. So I think some of this is a cultural issue that needs to be adopted by the institution, but it'll never be adopted until they have the proper tool to actually mine and use that data. And that's where I actually think uPlanner comes into play. It's a very powerful tool that'll take data from, as you mentioned, many different systems, join that data together, and then use machine learning and artificial intelligence to predict outcomes, whether that's predict how many sections of English do you need, how many sections of science do you need, et cetera, what time of day they should be scheduled, how many classrooms are needed, how many students are we going to put in a classroom to make it profitable. All those type of things have to be embraced by the organization,
Okay.
and they need a tool to do that.
Great. And there's also there's the technology component, but there's also the partner component. A company is gonna be, basically being there for the institution, engaging with the institution, helping them out. Probably, there's a lot of data and it's all, it could be messy, right? So,
Correct.
partners like uPlanner that can help them clean the data and make, that data mine to make sense of that data as well is important, like holding the hands basically during an implementation process.
Well, absolutely. And I think even after the fact,
Okay.
right? So the partners like yourselves need to be truly in bed, so to speak,
Mhm.
with those institutions so that they understand you have the resources, you have the knowledge, you have the know-how. You've been doing this for many, many other schools. Not all other schools have the ability to go out and hire a group of data scientists
Correct.
or business analysts that can actually understand this data. So it's very good to partner with an organization that will help you get there, because again, it is culture, but it's also technology, and then it's actual know-how.
Exactly. And every institution is different. So there could be cases where we will, as a vendor, have to adapt those algorithms or make changes to the models for that specific model that an institution is looking for. So, having the agility to make changes in a very rapid and speedy way is also important as a vendor, I guess, right?
Absolutely. Yes. I would agree with 100%.
Perfect. Thank you, Tony.
You're welcome.
So we're down to our last poll question before we take any questions and answer and respond to those questions. So the second or last poll question is, how do you currently utilize your institution's data for student retention efforts? And while you answer that, we want to give the audience an opportunity to ask questions. And I'm going to be stopping my slideshow right now. And hopefully I can start seeing some of those questions. 1 second. There we go. Look at the screen. I'll bring this here. So if you have any questions, please let us know, and we'll wait for a couple more minutes.
Barry, just getting back to the spreadsheet thing.
Yeah.
It's absolutely amazing to me that even very large schools with 500 plus classrooms spread out over numerous buildings, spread out over numerous campuses, are still using spreadsheets to schedule the rooms and the classrooms and the modalities of those classrooms. To me, it just seems like there's such an opportunity here to automate a lot of that and drive a lot of cost efficiencies. And that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to lay some people off, because there's always a lot of work to do at an institution, right? So those people that maybe historically were using those spreadsheets to schedule those classrooms and those facilities. Remember, I mentioned entertainment facilities and simulation centers. Those people can maybe be turned into advisors. There's never enough advisors for your student body. So like I said, it is amazing to me that nowadays people are still using spreadsheets to do such a task that can be automated very easily.
And it could be that also that, you go from using spreadsheets to a platform like uPlanner, and instead of, putting data in the spreadsheets and try to run different scenarios, you already have a solution that's going to model different simulations and predict different outcomes. So your job is going to be to find the best simulation, the one that's going to give you the best optimization, and also being able to recommend that to a faculty, a dean, in terms of the scheduling as well.
And the one thing that's drawn me into supporting the uPlanner product is the fact that you have the know-how. You've been doing this for a while. The schools don't have to tell you what data points they need. You can come in and you can actually help them identify what types of data that they need to populate the system to start making informed decisions and driving cost out of the equation. Whereas they may not have that talent. And so coming in there with the know-how and guiding them along is really key to a successful implementation. That's
a good point. Oh, we have a question here, Tony. Can you talk about how uPlanner may be able to help with streaming the registration process? Wow, that's a good question. I mean, semester start, I think enrollment registration happens a couple months before usually, maybe, right?
Some colleges, it's open year round, but
but in
usually a couple of months.
Correct. And those exercises happen. I think, just to answer the question, as you said, having one solution and one platform that can automate that process in the registration or enrollment timelines that these colleges and universities may have is going to be able not only to make it more efficient, I guess, but also be able to, streamline one source of data, as you said, to able to achieve those desired outcomes. Because at the end of the day, every institution has their own rules. As you said, in Florida, you have to have a maximum of 25 students per classroom. What if, God forbid, there's a hurricane that hits a specific, town or city here in Florida? How do you allocate space when the space is going to be closed? So there's a lot of things that are not taken into account into this equation, right?
Sure, absolutely. Well, I mean, I think applicant to registration is really important. I mean, there's the prospect funnel,
Mhm.
but I mean, once a student applies to a school, there should be a mechanism in place to get them into a seat. Because if the student took the time to apply to the school,
Of
it means
course.
they have a level of interest. And so I think uPlanner can help collect some of that data and
Mhm.
make sure that the applicants do get turned into students who register for classes.
Great. Thank you, Tony. So I'm going, oh, another question. There you go. Does uPlanner work with institutions that have multiple campuses? The question is yes. So our solution is also multi-campus. So you can have multi-modalities, you can have multiple campuses, and that's the beauty of the algorithms that we develop and continue to develop at uPlanner, because in itself, it's an ongoing development for us. For us, we believe in continuous innovation and improvements of our solutions. And as I said, there are different rules, and we make sure that those algorithms or advanced algorithms are adapted to different scenarios. So multiple campuses, yes, we can support that. Multimodality, which is another big thing happening, we can also support that as well. Great. So we are in the last few minutes. So you mentioned that it can, this is another question. You mentioned that it can work with different student platforms. Can you elaborate? Yes. So, we are agnostic towards the, different solutions or technologies that the college or university has. We work with multiple student information systems. We work with multiple LMSs, CRMs. It's all around data. And if you're able to get that data or extract that data, or if we can help you get that data and make our layouts understand that data, our predictive modeling can work very efficiently. So we're not focused on one specific, vendor. We work with, in-house built solutions and also third-party solutions that could be the providers of your SIS, your LMS, or your CRM, or your ERP.
Yeah, I mean, if I could add on to that, is what I just mentioned, is that uPlanner has the expertise to know what data is required to at least get this whole process going. So it doesn't matter what type of system you have, what type of student information system you have. It's what data fields are actually required to extract out of those systems and put into the uPlanner database. And so they do have the expertise to help organizations do that.
Great. Thank you, Tony. So we're down to the last couple minutes. So maybe some final thoughts, Tony. Anything you want to say to our audience member?
Well, like I said, I know I'm sounding repetitive, but I think, to really be efficient, and colleges and universities and institutions nowadays really do need to be efficient with the downturn in enrollment. And so driving cost out of the business increases profitability. It's just like running any other business, but of course, some programs are more important than others, and they may be loss leaders, like nursing as an example.
Okay.
It comes to mind where even if a nursing program wasn't profitable, if the community needs nurses, you're gonna train and you're gonna graduate nurses. So I just think it's important that institutions understand that it's no longer their agenda for the student. The student really needs to be catered to, and then the student will come back, and you will retain them, and eventually you will graduate them. And so, and I think the only way you can really do that is through the use of all the data analytics and all the data that's already available within inside your institution.
Great. And for me, I always say it's all about giving students flexibility and giving that student experience that is fundamental as well in the learning process of a student, right? So the best experience that they're going to have at a college university is going to allow them, as you said, to come back and eventually take another program or do continuing education. And those students will become, for the traditional students, they could become non-traditional students at some point. And also being able to, use, proven technologies like uPlanner to be able to optimize, to become more efficient in your scheduling, in your class allocation, section allocation, being able to really predict students that are at risk with various models. It doesn't have to be a one size fits all. Each institution could develop their own models as well. And I think for us as a vendor, we have to be flexible to our clients. We have to listen to our clients and be able to develop the best solution possible for them to utilize as well. And also, you know, you can reach out to us. Tony, I put your email there, your Gmail,
That's
just
fine.
in case. Okay. For me, you can reach out to me at my uPlanner email, or if you have general questions or you want to see our technologies, if you want to test our solutions, you can also email us at sales@uplanner.com. So I want to thank everyone who attended today's webinar. And Tony, thank you once again. It was great talking to you.
Thank you, Mary. It was a pleasure being here with you. Thank you very much.
Perfect. And